Meeting of the Water Committee, 3rd of March. We have a quorum. Welcome to those that are attending on live stream. We don't have any apologies. Do we have any declarations of interest with regard to our agenda today? No? Okay, thank you. We don't have any public forum, and so the first item on our agenda is item 4, which is the minutes of our previous meeting on the 3rd of February. Welcome, Michael. So, any questions or points of clarification from those minutes? Okay, there being none, can I have a mover and a seconder? Thanks, Mayor Campbell, and thanks, Councillor Stewart. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay. Tab 5 on our agenda is the draft waste services funding for growth policy and water services. Welcome, Rhiannon.
Good morning, Chair.
I do confession, Rhiannon, I walked into council this morning and did see the Welsh flag up, and I thought there's been a takeover. I understand it was to celebrate St David's Day, which was the first, and equally when the city was first commemorated as a city.
I did not know the coincidence of those two dates, but there must be some meaning behind it, Chair.
Well, it's what I'm taking from it as well.
So I will speak to the more prosaic matter of this water services funding for growth policy. This is a new required policy under the new regulatory structure for water. We have developed it in line with the disclosure requirements for the Commerce Commission. And it has been through legal review, which tidied up some wording and specification around definitions, which was very useful. We've taken the opportunity at the same time to bring you the revised water services fees and charges. So essentially we've separated them out of the main fees and charges schedule. We will always publish them together and consult on them together. But we have changed the structure slightly to align with the new Commerce Commission requirements. So essentially doesn't change anything in terms of how we're charging fees and charges, but rather provides greater transparency on how that works. You'll see within the fees and charges schedule more detail on the difference between ordinary and extraordinary connections, and those situations where there is a greater detail of engineering and network assessment, etc., which would need to be undertaken when the core network, and by that we mean either water, stormwater or sewerage networks, need to be extended. So this is largely a codification and transparency situation. It is not changing the situation on the ground. The report does also speak briefly to the revenue situation for water. There will be more detail on this as well in the full report to council when the fees and charges go up together with all of the other fees and charges for adoption for consultation. But it just notes that the increases in the water fees that have been made over the last few years, they're definitely starting to impact on demand, which in a way is a good thing because it's encouraging efficient use of water, but at the same time it does affect revenue. So on that note, happy to take any questions.
Okay, and just reframing the fact that the purpose of this largely is to get approval for this to go out for consultation.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's the key to it, committee members. Any questions? Couple. The last comment, Rhiannon, and it probably links to the question around, we are looking to try and continue to have people come to the city and grow our population, grow housing, those sorts of things. Is this reflected in this policy? Does it, would a developer, would someone that's looking to do some sort of investment in the city, be it in housing or commercially, look at this and say this is reasonable and fair?
That's a great question, but probably one that it's difficult or not really appropriate for me to answer as such, because this policy is simply describing the current situation. It is not proposing any policy changes from the position that council has taken. So you're correct that the one point I didn't speak to in detail is that one of the requirements of the Commerce Commission is that this policy must speak to development contributions as in if they exist by a council. We do not currently have development contributions and haven't had for many years, speaking exactly to the point you're raising, Chair, around encouraging development. The policy does speak to the low growth environment that the city has been in for a number of years, and the fact that this is the reason for the approach that is taken to growth funding, which is essentially a user pays on a contractual basis where the network extension is required, given that that actually happens in a small number of circumstances. It is recommended that we reconsider this issue as part of the long-term plan, and then that absolutely would be the appropriate route to take. So I can't really speak to what developers would view as fair or reasonable. I guess that really comes to the crux of any policy decision. You're essentially weighing up different factors that affect different aspects and coming to the position that you as councillors believe is fair and reasonable. My views on that matter are of irrelevance, I would guess.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, because I mean, my understanding, but you know, it's just my understanding, is that, you know, developer contributions can be cumbersome in terms of collection, and like they're not sort of a panacea of sort of way to fund infrastructure necessarily, are they? Michael?
Through yourself, Chair, I can cast some light in relation to that. The development contributions component is very much looking at what are all of your growth projects that are out into the future, and then future developments, providing a funding resource in relation to those. In a middle to low growth situations, it's not that advantageous from this council's position. However, when you start thinking about development levies, that does give you opportunities, but they will be discussed as part of the long-term plan process. They are future opportunities and future things we need to think about. At the moment, our only approach is, if the network needs extension, is to look at a financial contribution associated to that, or doing the build themselves associated to it. That is seen slightly positive because it's a clearer impact, but it is something we discuss with all current developers when they come in about that potential need and investment in relation to their individual developments right now. And that'll be something we'll reflect on when we get to the LTP and the development levies when they come into legislation, should they come into legislation.
So in terms of how do those two events phase in around us consulting on this document versus the possible change to legislation? Are we getting out of step? And i.e. we consult, we get feedback, and then the legislation changes and we sort of are in a bit of a bind of what we've decided?
Essentially, we will need to review the policy, but the requirements of the timeframes laid out by the Commerce Commission are that we must have a policy adopted in line with our significance and engagement policy by the end of June. Yeah. Essentially in time for next year's annual plan, so hence the timeframes that we're working to now. Okay. But it is very likely that we will need to update this policy on a regular basis as changes are made in the rating policy. It's just the nature of these documents. So we will look to consult on it as part of the LTP as well, I would imagine.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have the paper asks us to note that we received this draft water services funding for growth policy and fees and charges consultation, note the disclosure requirements for the Commerce Commission, and note the legal review. And then it asks the committee to recommend to council adopt the draft water services funding for growth consultation and adopt the draft water services charges. Can I have a mover and a second to go? Thank you, Steve. Mayor Campbell, second. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Russell and Rhiannon. Tab 6 is our ICC Water Services Business Unit Project Status Update. Andrew, welcome.
Good morning. Okay, just sort that out. Right, so this is turning into our monthly status update on the Water Services Business Unit project, just reflecting on progress and bringing key issues or items to this forum for discussion. In terms of where we are at as a project, our terms of reference, we had our project steering group last week. We got the final set of edits into that terms of reference, so we've taken a bit to just polish that, 2 or 3 turns. But as a group, I think we're comfortable with that. So looking to bring the terms of reference and the project initiation document to this forum for approval at the next meeting. So that's where we're within that project initiation document. We're looking to baseline our project budget. So we've done the final sort of scoping and estimating, so arrived at a final budget that we want to bring to this group for the next meeting for approval. Let me just check my notes here. In terms of, so that's from a project, I guess, governance perspective, so all those forums are up and running and operating well. From a financial ring fencing, we've made good progress in the last month. We've basically, call it peeling the onion, just understanding all the options and complexity around implementing financial ring fencing from a systems and process perspective. Looking to, for Tech One, currently we've got a request out to our Tech One vendor colleagues to provide an estimate to what would be involved in building that out. It's basically using the existing Tech One entity that we have for ICC and building that out for the water services business within Tech One. So nothing really highlighting, well, that BA, the anticipation is that effort will be within the estimate that we have within the budget, so we think we're covered there. And I guess we've work to reduce some of the uncertainty as to how we're going to implement that financial ring fencing. But until we get that Tech One quote back and confirmation of their work, there's still some risk around that. We need to have those changes in by 30 June, but it's all sounding positive. But until we hear that final back from them, there's still some risk around that. In terms of the information disclosure, so the Commerce Commission last week released their final determination, and there's just a few things that are worth noting in that. So in terms of the determination, it applies to wastewater and water services. They've offered a transitional pathway to compliance. So they'd previously said there was, in the draft document, there was the option to they produced some optionality, but without making a determination as to when those things those options would all apply. Whatever the case, as a council, we need to be fully compliant by 2030. So they've offered a pathway for compliance, where you've self-disclose your non-compliance against those disclosures and provide your roadmap to compliance. But whatever the case, we need to be fully compliant by 2030. So there's a bit of work that will need to be done as to gap analysis ourselves against the requirements and where we are today. And that's probably a good segue. So we've gone out to the market for asset management support. It's a key area for us in terms of our capability. We've really got to, we're going to need some external support to support the teams that we have within council. We've got an RFQ out to, I think it's 6 different suppliers, and just knowing that in the New Zealand market there's councils and new CCOs all approaching the market with quite specialist skills and all working to the same timeline, so there's a bit of risk around that as to what sort of RFQ response we get back. But I think we've cast the net wide enough, and we've got some good capability also in-house, so until we hear those RFQs back, again, there's a bit of risk there as that our budget estimates are slightly lower than maybe the market is coming back with, but we'll know that next time that we come back to this group as to how that RFQ has gone. What else do I want to call out? Yeah, so in terms of information disclosure, we just heard around the growth policy and fees and charges, so that's one key piece for the 30 June 26 deliverables. The other is community access to drinking water. So that review is underway as to what are the communities within Invercargill City that we don't supply, and understanding how they get access to drinking water and what are the risks associated with that. So that's a review that's underway at the moment. Might certainly be able to bring a status update, something written to the next committee. But whatever the case, that final review will be brought to this committee for approval before we submit it to the DIA for 30 June 26. What else is worth calling out? We've got our overarching procurement plan for the project, so staying within our governance guidelines there. Something to call out. We've got, there's a ambiguity, we'll call it that, around the way in which stormwater and wastewater laterals, the ownership of those within what's owned by council and what is owned by property owners. We're just having a legal review done on that as to how can we bring, or how can we resolve that ambiguity, and yeah, looking to bring again something to the next committee as to what the options and pros and cons are associated with that. And yeah, there'll be some financial implications as well around that, but just, I guess, spoiler alert that we're doing some work in that area and looking to bring the results of that to the next committee. What else would I like to call out? Yeah, overarching, the team, we've got great people working on the project, particularly in the finance and technology space. So really seeing the value of the teams and their understanding of council systems coming to the fore. So yeah, not as needful to rely on externals there, but the last piece in the jigsaw is bringing on that external support in the asset management space. And with that, I'd be a lot happier and feel like we've got a fully formed and running team. So, pause there and see if there's questions.
Any questions?
Actually, I'll leap in because I should have mentioned the scorecard at the is attached as appendice. It has our total budget that has been approved. It doesn't include hasn't been populated with forecast and actuals. So apologies, next time the scorecard comes in front of you, it will be fully up and running. It takes a bit of work to populate the back end. So I got the budget in, but not the rest. So that will be resolved. Yes, yeah. Total forecast is not accurate.
Okay, so while the others give consideration to some questions, I've got a couple, Andrew. Oh, a comment firstly, I think this paper probably wins the award for the most acronyms. The challenge to that is not everyone understands them, so I think what we need to do is just make sure in the paper we just include, when we first use the acronym, we put the full word there so everyone knows what we're talking about. So just with regards to the procurement process, for the asset management. So I suppose my question is around the committee being comfortable with that process to ensure we get the best provider in the sense of, the scope of what we're looking for, and how how the committee can take confidence that we have actually got the best provider. Not only price, but obviously capability is a key part of it as well. So what will the committee see around that process to ensure that we are getting the best provider?
Flick to Michael on that one.
Yeah, I'll take that. Through Self-Chair, the asset management function is normally provided through an in-house service that we provide. The challenge we've got in this is the capacity in relation to our in-house. So the Scope is very defined because it's already what we provide from a organisation's point of view with our
Yeah.
asset management. So it's basically an additional resource to supplement the fact that we don't have capacity within the asset management to perform it ourselves. And so therefore the scope is within the internal component in relation to asset management. The procurement approach will be adhered to the already approved council procurement approach, so we'll be following all procurement processes according to that with our tendering processes, etc. But we are focused on scope as the scope that's within our normal asset management approach. It is backfill in relation to supplementing resource.
Could the committee see that scope?
I'll defer to the GM of Three Waters to see if...
We have a conversation, Three South Chair, happy to have a conversation about that. Also just to provide some confidence to elected members of the committee, the identified suppliers are at the top of their game and what they do throughout New Zealand. The risk that we've got here that Andrew's identified and spoken of is all other water service entities throughout the country are also competing for the same documentation required in the asset management space. So we have done some front-end work to confirm that these suppliers are ready and suitably have suitable capacity should they be deemed successful in undertaking this activity. So 4 of them in particular have been well-known suppliers that we've worked with closely in the past across previous work streams. They're well-established, they are national providers, and again at the top of what they do in the asset management field for Three Waters.
Yeah, I suppose that if you take it forward, it's a critical part of the business, right? And so, getting the right business, and it's comforting to hear what you've said, Matt. I think it's still valuable just for the committee just to be aware of the process going on. We haven't got any influence over it, it follows the procurement process, but I think it's important the committee has an oversight of, hey, this is in hand, we're following the process, and the process is gonna pull out the best possible provider for us. So that's how we do that. We'll have a yarn about.
Through yourself, Chair, happy to share what we put into the tender process, which will have the scope anyway.
Yeah.
Within it.
Yeah, that'd be good if you just flick that around the committee members. Thank you. Other questions yet? I've got more. So on page 3 or 4 of the report, or 35, I think it is, a board box, the risk and mitigants table. Do the factors in the mitigation.
So what page are you on, Chair?
3 or 4 of the report, or page 35 of board books. The mitigations, do they completely mitigate the risk that we feel? And note the word use of risk and a mitigation, and the communication risk.
So just stepping through them there in terms of implementation costs, the budget that we're looking to have got approval from the PSG from, and we'll bring to this next forum. Confident that we'll, as we stand today, within that envelope. There's a few particular risks which I've noted, but we are certainly within that. The economic regulatory reporting requirements, those were released last week, so the next time we sit down, we would have done our gap analysis against those, or certainly advance that. So nothing that we've seen so far has blown the scope out and required us to do anything more than we expected. It's just basically produced a longer runway to compliance. The amalgamation piece of Southland, that's an unknown. I guess we're reactive as to what happens in that space, but it's I would say it's well further out beyond where we are with our compliance regulatory dates for June of this year and June of 27. In terms of project delivery risk, that's where I guess we've got the frequency of coming back to this forum to highlight changes as to new stuff that's come up during the last month, and just making sure that we're being fully transparent as to where our issues and risks lie. I think we could, good feedback point in that we could keep this table updated. The scorecard has probably got a bit more granularity against it, so I think as a feedback point, just keeping that table updated with our risks of that reporting period would be useful.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I think what would be useful to add to the right-hand column would just be a colour coding of green, orange or red. Sure. So just that we can... and I do wonder on the second last one, the project delivery risk, whether there should be governance and management oversight in that. There's an obligation by this committee to ensure that this process gets done well, and, we'll be the ones that are held accountable if we get this wrong. So, I think governance oversight as well as management oversight is a critical part of that project delivery, would be the only comment. But if you could reflect on that and have those red, orange, green, or another colour, if you like. Michael.
Through yourself, Chair, just a direct answer to your question is no, the mitigations do not get rid of the risks, because the risk will still remain regardless. It's the level of the risks that will be lowered in relation to it.
That's right.
We've got mitigations in place.
It's managing the risk, right?
We'll continue to monitor all of these risks. There are a few other operational risks we are monitoring as well, but i.e. resourcing and those sort of things. But from perspective of these ones, because they're so unknown, if you had a colour coding, some of these would be amber and red in relation to it if you did a colour code. Because they are unknown, we haven't got the legislation landed yet, so we don't know. We can only monitor at this stage. I would caution in using the colour component at this point, because we usually use high, medium, low, and that doesn't really fit in your colour coding.
Well, yeah, whatever, yeah.
But happy to put the high, medium, low in relation to where they sit and where we mitigated it. So I'll work with Andrew to actually work through what we actually do in relation to that, Chair.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point, but I think we need to highlight it, the fact that we are in a bit of unknown territory because regulation isn't set in concrete, right? So, we need to be aware of that. The public needs to be aware of that. That's a risk we're operating within, right? Because of the changing legislation, I think. So, yeah, I think we need to call that out, just make sure we're aware of that. The other point would just be on page 39 of board books, and I don't know if it's got a shared timeline of when your projects are landing. So I assume that if I take, for example, the implementation Tech 1 system right at the bottom in blue, that we're expecting to have that all delivered by May 26 because the bar ends there. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in terms of, and it is, I fully admit, scoping and planning in progress.
Yes, that one, yeah.
So those aren't baselined at the moment. That's the piece we're waiting for Tech 1 to come back with the cost and time to implement the changes. But everything that we've heard is that they're able to make those changes and have them implemented by 30 June. We just haven't nailed down that exact time frame. So they are indicative for the moment. And yeah, similar to the asset management system changes, those are not tied to a 30 June delivery date. That's implementation. That's our dependency project to implement the new Tech 1 enterprise asset management system. But we are flexible as to when that occurs. So those haven't been baselined or fully planned out at present.
I think what I'm looking for from that is to understand where we're at, what we've got to do, where we're at, and where we're expecting, when we're expecting it to be completed. So I think we'll just sort of continue to add to that so we get that confidence from that.
For sure, yeah, and that's where for the next committee meeting, I would expect we'll have that Tech 1 delivery plan in place, and in fact, the enterprise asset management system changes for scheduled for Q4 of this year, so we'll be able to update that as well.
Any other questions from committee members? No? Okay, so thanks, Andrew. We've got 3 points here. Receive the report, note the current program status, and note the draft milestones plan, which is attachment 2. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thanks, Mayor Campbell. Seconded, Councillor Cricket. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay.
Steve?
Thank you. So, tab 7, Three Waters operational performance. Russell on that, I think.
Through South Chair, it was taken and noted at last meeting in February of desire to, I guess, prepare a framework and promote some transparency around the operational activities that our team undertakes across our network every single day. And I guess we've taken that. I've spoken to members of Russell's team and Adrian's team in a bit of detail, and we've taken that a great opportunity to actually advocate for a team of really well trained and experienced staff that deliver some really that they're unsung heroes of our city that go unnoticed in everything they do every day to promote people having potable water at the tap, to people being able to flush their respective toilets and comply with environmental obligations. So that's the challenge we've taken today that we present to the committee. What does that look like? That looks like compliant water takes, that looks like compliant environmental discharges, that looks like capital updates around what's happening around the city of a capital renewal nature of pipes infrastructure. And that looks like key milestones within our resourcing fronts as well, where we could have risks or points to raise to the committee. So happy to take feedback on the report, and I'll take the report as read.
Comments or questions? Mayor Campbell?
It's not a question, actually. I made the comment that I thought it was an absolutely first-class operational report. Very, very good. I'd almost like to see it copied into some other areas, to be honest, but it's very, very understandable, I think, for the committee.
Mayor Campbell, yeah, well done to the team, not only yourselves, but equally the wider team for all the work they do around the city, and just want to reinforce that comment you made, Matt. They are the unsung heroes of our city, so we really appreciate the work that they're doing and the way you guys are leading them. I've got a couple of questions, and it is around an acronym. What's a SCADA?
Sorry, I'll take that. So that's Supervisory Control Data Acquisition. So that is Russell's brain to the operation, if you like. So Russell can get some sleep.
Yeah.
So it's an electronic electrical system that pages alarms and allows for us to monitor the city network.
Cool. Okay, thank you. And then just, and it probably is a Russell question. So Russell, noting the inflow of water to the system and outflow through the wastewater, and appreciate there will be always be a bit of a difference. We don't have sort of, well, we have some monitoring of that system, but what anecdotal data can we be pulling together to understand the efficiency of the system?
Through the chair, the way the system works is we produce water, we discharge at our wastewater treatment plant. On a high level thing, we say that on normal things we put through our wastewater treatment plant about 70 to 80% of the water that we make. The rest of it goes to gardens, grounds, leakage, losses and that sort of stuff. At the moment we don't water meter, so we do not know what our usage on our residential side is. But we do know that most of our wastewater treatment plants, pump stations, are monitored, and from the slides that you've seen, we can record the amount of infiltration, which is stormwater getting to our wastewater systems, so we can actually see how our performance of our network's going based on that. The economical and the functionality of that and the costs associated to become efficient is somewhat hard to do, because when the pipes leak, they leak, and we cannot control the rainfall coming into them.
Yeah, I think in the absence of a high-tech system that tells us everything that's happening on the network, which is probably nirvana, it'd be good to try and build up a sort of some anecdotal points that give us a sense of what's happening through time, of, you know, what happens if it's dry, what happens if it's wet. You know, we're never going to get it accurate, but I feel as there'll be information sitting within the system that will give us some insight if we look at it from a high level, might direct us around investment, might direct us around, you know, maintenance. Are we got the right cadence around our maintenance and renewals, those sorts of things? So I suppose what I'm thinking is that we just need to try and pull as much data out as we can to enable us to make informed decisions about our capital program, our renewals, and just generally our system and its effectiveness. But, you know, you're the expert, so I'll rely on you to do that. And I appreciate a lot of it's going to be anecdotal and a bit of sort of finger in the air.
Through the chair, we do have a number of systems that we can run. Our SCADA system monitors our, like I said, our pump station flows. We've got rainfall data, so we can actually say how much infiltration we're getting into a system.
Yeah.
As part of our capital upgrade process, we have seen on the water side specifically, the amount of water we were actually making at Branksome and supplying to the city has reduced. And that was around, we put a big main down Tay Street and D Street. Anecdotally noted that effectively we don't know what our flows are, but we have seen a continuous drop in what we make, a very small one, and we believe that is due to our capital upgrades, replacing leaky pipes into the system. Hand on heart, I can't tell you that is the reason. But we've seen no reduction in our industry loads, so we would only assume that our upgrading work on our water mains is causing some of that savings.
Yeah, that's really good insight, actually. And I mean, if you put a value on that water, you'd say that's part of the return on investment of doing the capital program, right? Because we're having to pull less through. Yeah. Okay. Look, I've got a couple of questions. Page 5 of the. Oh, right. Sorry, Michael.
Through yourself, Chair, just wanted to highlight a couple of items in relation to the stats and the data. We do have most of the stats and data that you're referring to, and the DIA will be mandatory requiring some of those, which will flow through the reporting through here in relation to that. Our operator, Russell's already indicated one of the critical gaps, which is from reservoir, in relation to water reservoir and into our residential, without anything monitoring at the residential consumption space. That does mean there is a data gap in relation to that. You don't know what's going out that side of it, but we can measure what's going out from there. We just don't know what's ending up at the residence side of it. So until you have a network that's monitoring all the in and out, they are always going to have a data gap associated to that. But we will have requirements from Commerce Commission via the DIA in relation to what we provide, and Matu Arawai. So just want to highlight those once they're in place will be coming through this committee.
So on page 5 of the, yeah, that one there, yeah. Just the 2 water mains, 3 sewers, 5, 1. It'd be interesting to see comparative data. So, you know, how does that go? Is that higher or lower? You know, and again, that's to me, and you know, it's another wee bit of anecdotal sort of evidence that may sort of guide us to sort of investment or question some things we're doing around capital or R&M.
Yep, 3 South Chair, comment noted, acknowledged. Baseline data from previous 12 months was desired. It was purely a time commitment for this particular report. So, yep, we will aim to have a benchmark up for next month's reporting. for elected members to reference against.
Yeah, thank
Also, just to support the CE's previous comments, in the asset management space, elected members are advised that we are looking at undertaking some additional work across our distribution network, in particular for water, so our water mains, to understand where we have demand, supply and demand constraints, if any, and that also aids into previous discussions around development optionality for developers if they were coming through to say they want a parcel of land to develop. What are our options and what are our requirements? So that's something that is happening behind the scenes for us to obtain some intelligence about what's happening 24 hours a day across our network. So we're looking at electronic flow metering capabilities there, and that work's well underway from a design perspective. Modelling goes hand in hand on top of that, hydraulic modelling for our drainage network and sewer. We have some constraints in that space that the CE touched on, which was around staff resource, but they are the key commitments that aid to promoting clear visibility to external parties wishing to interact with us on and off our network.
Matt. Alex.
Matt actually just answered the question I was going to ask.
Cool. He's not only good at reporting, he's good at reading minds. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with Amir. Great report. Very much appreciated as I was reading through it and Steve speak. Just on capital delivery, the delivery highlights, I thought it was a generous reflection that we don't get it right all the time when managing these critical infrastructure projects. But I guess the inference is that when you say we don't get it right all the time and we've received some feedback, is there any key learnings that have come from some of that public feedback?
Absolutely. So through South Chair, it comes to how we connect with our people, how we connect with our ratepayers, and I guess that commitment to always improve. We recognise that improvements constantly, that is the challenge there, is to look at ourselves and where we stack up with other entities around the country, and likewise with our suppliers that support us in doing what we do every day on our networks. Likewise with our reticulation supplier being down in New Zealand, they've delivered support to council for 10 years now, and do so at a high standard, and have built their own level of intelligence across our networks, and likewise with their staff resourcing and growth and succession. So that's something we're pretty proud of. But I guess to close circle on that question, yes, I guess it's us being visible and being active and responding in a timely manner. So we don't always get that right. So.
It's a good question. I had it down, and thanks, Matt, for answering it. And I think it is just about, what have we learnt, but equally what went well, and just very high level. So, if we say communication, it might be, is it communicating earlier about the project or through the project, or being more responsive? And it's just as simple as that, and I think that gives real confidence to us and also our public that, okay, we don't always get it right, and that's fine. But when we don't, we're always on this continuous learning environment and program. So, yeah, that's a good answer. Mayor Campbell.
I think just for this discussion and thinking about it, and I still think this is a great report. I think because this is a very specialist committee, we have one topic, which is water. I think we need, through time, to get a deeper understanding of it than probably other committees would normally do. So I think the kind of detailed information that maybe the questions that you're asking in particular, Chair, I think more relevant to this committee perhaps than to most other committees of council, because they usually get quite broad mandates. This one's mandate is very, very clearly to be almost like a board running a water company, and we need that kind of level of understanding. So I would just encourage more rather than less information to be brought.
Yeah, and it's in that key information piece, right? It's not a information dump, and I think you're on the right track, and I think you've done a great job, and we're on a learning process, and we'll definitely, I know there's aspiration within yourself, Matt, and the management to continually improve and be world class here, so appreciate the efforts today. Okay, look, there's no more questions, so the report just asks us to receive the Three Waters update, noting in the minutes, please, the quality of the report, if you could, thanks. And then the PowerPoint presentation. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Broad and Councillor Cricket. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Sorry, just through the chair, just before we move on to the next item. So all committee members are comfortable with the configuration of that report. They just wish to see the baseline data that's been referenced against the prior year.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's cool. Thank you. Right. We now need to move into, I think we're finished there, aren't we? Yeah, public excluded. And we're moving in to that largely around legal professional privilege with regard to an item on that agenda. So thank you, Mayor Campbell, and seconded Councillor Stewart. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you to those that have joined us online.